I didn't realize that morning would be the last normal moment I'd have for a long time. My wife, Emily, had been feeling uneasy since sunrise, but she insisted it was nothing serious. She smiled through it, the way she always does when she doesn't want me to worry. She made her tea, sat on the couch, and told me to go to work like everything was fine. But something about the way she pressed her hand against her stomach made me feel like leaving her alone was the wrong choice. I kept checking my phone while driving to work, hoping she'd text me saying she felt better. Instead, around noon, she called me with a voice so soft it nearly stopped my heart. She said she needed me home. Not later. Not after I finished work. Now. I didn't ask questions. I left immediately, breaking every speed limit between my office and home. When I walked through the door, I saw her trying to stand, gripping the kitchen counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. There was no color in her face. She looked like someone who was barely hanging on. She whispered that the pain was getting worse and that something felt wrong inside her belly. Not just pregnancy pain, something darker, sharper, and terrifying. I helped her onto a chair and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The dispatcher answered calmly, asking me the usual questions. I gave our address, told them about the pregnancy, the pain, the way she was trembling. I was expecting panic from the dispatcher. Instead, she said an ambulance was already on the way and would arrive in 8 to 10 minutes. For a second, I felt relief. 8 minutes. I could survive 8 minutes. Emily could survive 8 minutes. Then something hit me like a slap to the face. Something I should have checked earlier. Something I always checked, except today. I ran outside to the end of my driveway, toward the only path that leads to my house. That narrow wooden bridge I built myself 3 years ago because the HOA road floods whenever a cloud even looks at us wrong. That bridge has saved us so many times. But today, it betrayed me. Or more accurately, today it was sabotaged. I froze when I saw it. There was no bridge. There was only a wall. A massive barricade of trash bags, cardboard boxes, cracked plastic flower pots, broken lawn ornaments, and a pile of junk so high it looked like something you'd expect behind a dollar store after Black Friday. There were even 2 old patio chairs, wedged on top like some kind of throne. And sitting right in the middle of the trash pile was a sign written in giant black marker. Bridge closed until HOA review. My stomach turned cold. My hands went numb. I knew exactly who did it. There's only one person in my entire neighborhood who wakes up every morning craving control like oxygen. The HOA president. HOAKaren. This wasn't a protest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a message. Her message. She hated my bridge. She had been fighting me for weeks over permits and technicalities because she wanted to force me to use the official HOA road that she practically guards like a gatekeeper. And today, she finally did something about it. Something stupid. Something dangerous. Something that might cost me everything. I stepped toward the trash pile and tried kicking it, pulling it, ripping apart anything I could get my hands on, but there was too much. The trash was soaked from last night's rain, heavy and stuck together. I could barely move anything. Behind me, from the house, I heard Emily calling for me. Her voice was weak, cracking. She didn't sound like my wife anymore. She sounded scared. My heart began to pound so violently, I thought it might burst. 8 minutes. The ambulance would be here in 8 minutes. But what good is an ambulance if it can't reach my house? My phone buzzed in my pocket. HOAKaren. Her name flashed across my screen like a villain entrance. I answered with my teeth clenched. She immediately started talking, as if she had been waiting for me to find her masterpiece of a trash barricade. She said she had temporarily disabled access to the bridge because it was under review for noncompliance. I told her there was an ambulance coming. I told her my wife needed help. I told her I didn't care about the bridge or the HOA or any of her rules right now. But she didn't stop. She didn't soften. She didn't even sound surprised. She just said, in the calmest voice imaginable, that rules cannot be bent for personal emergencies. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The panic exploded inside me. Because that's when it finally hit me. My wife's life was in danger. And the only person standing between her and help was her. The first thing I heard was the siren in the distance. It was faint at first, just a thin wail carried by the wind, but it felt like a lifeline pulling me out of panic. I ran back toward the house, shouting to Emily that help was almost here. She nodded weakly from the doorway, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. She was trying to be brave for me, even though every breath looked like it hurt. I rushed back to the end of the driveway. The siren grew louder, closer, stronger. I could practically feel the vibration through the ground. All I had to do was make sure the EMTs reached us. I kept staring down the road, waiting for that flicker of red and blue lights. Then the ambulance finally turned the corner. They slowed when they saw me waving like a madman. But when the headlights hit the trash mountain blocking the bridge, the driver slammed the brakes so hard the tires screeched. The ambulance stopped like it had run into an invisible wall. My heart dropped. This wasn't just a blockage. This was a trap. The driver stepped out first. He looked at the bridge, then at me, then at the trash pile again like he couldn't believe this was real. Another EMT came around the side, squinting at the mess. I explained everything in one long breath, talking so fast the words nearly tangled. I told them my wife was inside and she couldn't walk. I told them the bridge was the only way in. I told them I tried to clear it, but it was too much. I told them about Karen. The EMT listened, but every second felt like a minute. He finally said they couldn't drive the ambulance over the bridge in this condition. They weren't even allowed to cross an HOA-managed structure without official clearance, especially if someone had declared it unsafe. Unsafe. That was the word Karen wrote in her complaint last week. She knew exactly what she was doing. The EMT checked his watch. They needed to reach my wife fast. They needed a pathway immediately. We both grabbed big pieces of trash and started yanking them off the bridge. Wet cardboard, heavy trash bags, cracked wooden pieces, rusted metal rods. Everything was slippery and dirty and fighting against us. Every time I moved one thing, something else fell into its place like the pile was regenerating itself. I kept thinking about Emily. Her pale face. Her shaking hands. The way she whispered my name, like she was holding on to me just to stay conscious. My arms felt like they were tearing apart, but I didn't stop. I refused to stop. The EMTs kept saying we needed a clear path for the stretcher, but the progress we were making was too slow. Not nearly enough. Then I heard another engine behind us. A smooth one. A familiar one. Karen's SUV came rolling up like she had timed her entrance perfectly. Her headlights hit the trash pile like she was showing off her artwork. She parked with absolute confidence, stepped out, and crossed her arms at the end of my driveway. Her expression wasn't confused or stressed or even curious. She looked satisfied. The EMT tried talking to her. He kept it calm, professional, explaining that we had an emergency. He asked why the bridge was blocked and whether it could be cleared. Karen answered like she was reading from a script she'd been practicing all morning. The bridge was closed. The trash was part of an inspection. The HOA deemed the structure unsafe. No, she couldn't remove the blockade until after the board reviewed everything. I walked toward her slowly, trying to stay in control. My hands were shaking, my voice was shaking, everything inside me was shaking. I told her that my wife could die. I told her I didn't care about the HOA. I told her to move the trash. But she didn't budge. She stared at me with a blank, polite smile and said it wasn't her responsibility. If I had submitted the permit paperwork correctly, none of this would have happened. For a moment, everything went silent. The wind stopped. The world stopped. The EMT finally stepped between us and told her that obstructing emergency services was a crime. She raised her chin slightly like she didn't believe him. She said she had every right to enforce HOA rules. Even now. Even during an emergency. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in anger. In clarity. I realized there was no point arguing with someone who cared more about rules than human life. Emily couldn't wait. The ambulance couldn't cross. The trash wasn't moving. But I knew something that could move it. Something sitting inside my barn. I didn't waste another second. I ran past Karen, past the EMTs, past the trash mountain, straight toward the barn. Because if the HOA wanted a fight, they picked the worst possible day. And I wasn't going to let my wife suffer because someone wanted to feel powerful. I don't remember my feet touching the ground while running to the barn. I just remember the sound of the ambulance crew struggling behind me, the faint groans of my wife from the house, and Karen's voice echoing like nails scraping metal. The barn door slammed open so hard it bounced. Inside, covered in dust and sitting like a sleeping giant, was my old green tractor. I hadn't used it in months, but today it felt like the only thing in the world that could save my wife. I climbed up, turned the key, and for a second I prayed the engine wouldn't fail me. There was a half-second of silence, then it roared awake with a growl deep enough to shake the walls. The sound carried across the yard. I saw Karen spin around, eyes widening like she'd just witnessed a crime in progress. She took a step forward, holding out a hand like she could somehow stop 3 tons of metal with pure HOA authority. I didn't slow down. I didn't speak. I didn't look at her. The tires dug into the dirt as I drove toward the bridge. The EMTs stepped out of the way, watching with a mix of shock and hope. They knew what I was about to do, and they didn't try to stop me. Karen, of course, tried everything. She stood in the path of the tractor. I honked. She stood firmer. I honked again. She waved her clipboard like it was a sword. I turned slightly, steering around her, because running over the HOA president, no matter how tempting, would probably slow things down even more. When I reached the edge of the bridge, I finally saw the pile the way the EMTs had. It looked impossible. The trash bags were swollen from the rain, half-rotten, stacked with pieces of broken furniture like someone had taken apart a whole backyard and dumped it right there. It didn't matter. This wasn't trash. This was a wall she had built between my wife and help. I lowered the tractor's front loader. Karen's voice shot through the air like a siren of her own. She screamed that I was destroying HOA property. She screamed I would be fined. She screamed the words violation, report, and legal consequences, like she was trying to summon a lawyer out of thin air. But the tractor didn't care. And at that moment, neither did I. I pushed the loader forward and hit the trash pile. The sound was unbelievable, a crunch, a scrape, a wet collapse. The whole top half of the garbage mountain slid like an avalanche, rolling down into the ditch beside the bridge. A wave of sour smell hit me, but I didn't care. I kept pushing. Broken chairs snapped under the metal. Cardboard disintegrated. Old plastic items cracked like brittle bones. A garden gnome flew into the air and disappeared, probably happy to escape the HOA. Karen shrieked loud enough to echo off the trees. She yelled that I was going to jail. She said I was damaging critical inspection materials. She said more, but the tractor engine drowned her out, a perfect mercy. Within a minute, half the pile was gone. Within 2 minutes, the bridge was halfway clear. Within 3, I could finally see a full path across. That's when the EMTs rushed forward. They didn't waste a second. They grabbed their stretcher and medical bags and bolted over the newly cleared bridge toward my house. I shut off the tractor and jumped down, my legs shaking from adrenaline. I could hear Emily calling faintly again. That was all that mattered. But Karen wasn't done. She marched right up to me, red-faced, shaking, furious. She jabbed her finger at the bridge, then at me, then at the ditch full of trash. She said I had no right to interfere. She said the HOA rulebook gave her authority. She said this wasn't personal. I looked at her with a calmness I didn't know I had left. I told her that today, rules didn't matter. People did. And if she wanted to punish me for saving my wife, she was free to try. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. She raised her phone and started recording, narrating the damage I had caused like she was making a documentary. I didn't stay to listen. I ran after the EMTs toward the house. Inside, I found them kneeling beside Emily. One held her hand, speaking gently. The other checked her vitals, their expression tightening with concern. One EMT looked up at me and said we needed to move fast. She needed the hospital. Now. The stretcher was ready. The ambulance was waiting. The bridge was clear. But as they lifted her carefully, as I held her hand and told her I was right there, I caught one last glimpse outside. Karen was standing on the bridge, filming everything, muttering into her phone like she was building a case. She still didn't understand. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about survival. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat on the couch with the porch light on, watching the bridge like it was some kind of enemy checkpoint. Every creak of the wind made me think someone was dragging new trash cans onto my land. Every car passing on the highway made me sit up straighter. Because deep down, I knew something was coming. And whatever it was, wasn't going to be small. The next morning, before the sun even pushed through the trees, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee that was already shaking in my hand. I walked to the bridge to check if Karen had done anything overnight. She had. Of course she had. Right in the center of my bridge sat a fresh stack of garbage bags, not yesterday's pile. These were new, dripping with some kind of sticky brown liquid that smelled like spoiled fruit and chemicals mixed together. And worst of all, taped to one of the bags was a neon pink note that read, "Private property, HOA protected pathway, unauthorized use will result in fines." Karen. My bridge. On my land. Apparently now, HOA protected. I felt my jaw lock so tight, I could hear the click in my ears. I pulled the bags off the bridge one by one, trying not to gag from the smell. Halfway through, a pickup truck slowed behind me. For a second, I thought it might be one of the neighbors offering help. But no. It was Karen, sitting in her fancy silver SUV like a queen watching peasants farm her land. She didn't even roll her window down. She just smirked. My hands froze mid-lift. "Seriously," I said, loud enough for her to hear. The window came down an inch. Just an inch. Just documenting, she said, in case you damage HOA materials. HOA materials, I pointed at the pile. That's garbage, Karen. She nodded with that fake smile she wears like a badge. Yes, garbage that marks a restricted access point. Restricted to who? Me. Her lips curled. Especially you. I felt heat rising in my chest. You're blocking my emergency access again. Not an emergency today, she said, unless you're planning another dramatic performance. I swear that one sentence nearly made my vision go white. Dramatic performance. My wife nearly died because of her. But I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just stared at her and said quietly, if I need an ambulance again and this trash is here, someone will be held responsible. She shrugged, then don't have emergencies. Then she rolled up her window and drove away. I stood there, fists shaking, bags dripping all over the bridge, feeling my gut twist like I'd swallowed barbed wire. This wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This was personal. This was war. When I got back inside, my wife was sitting up in bed, her face pale but her eyes soft. Hey, she whispered, you're up early. I sat beside her and forced a smile, just checking something outside. She looked at me the way she always does when she knows I'm lying but doesn't want to call me on it. Is she still doing things? I kissed her forehead. Don't worry, I'm handling it. But even as I said the words, I felt like a fraud, because handling it, no, I wasn't handling anything. Karen was getting worse, not better. And deep down, I had this sinking feeling that she was building up to something bigger. A few hours later, I heard another engine outside. This one wasn't Karen's SUV. It was deeper, heavier. I stepped onto the porch and saw a huge flatbed truck backing toward my bridge. My stomach dropped. On the back of the truck were 6 industrial-sized dumpsters. I walked fast, almost running toward the driver. Hey, wrong property. He held up a clipboard. Not according to this order. Who ordered dumpsters here? He pointed casually toward the HOA office across the road. Karen. Always Karen. My voice cracked. You can't unload those here. The driver shrugged. Lady paid extra for immediate placement, said this driveway and bridge are HOA waste transition zones. Look man, I just work here. And before I could say another word, he hit the hydraulic release. Boom! A metal dumpster slammed onto the gravel near the bridge. Boom! Another one. And another. The ground shook under my feet. By the time he drove off, 6 massive dumpsters sat between my house and my only exit. They looked like giant prison blocks, cold, metal, impossible to move without machinery. I stood there staring at them, my throat dry, my pulse thundering in my ears. Karen had escalated. Way past trash bags. Way past harassment. Now she'd blocked off my entire escape route, with literal industrial barriers. If an ambulance needed to get through again. There was no way. None. And right then, right as fear started sinking its claws into me, my phone vibrated. A message from a neighbor. You better check HOA Facebook. Karen just posted something about you. I opened the app, and the first thing I saw made the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. Karen had uploaded pictures of me removing the trash bags that morning. And labeled me as a dangerous and unstable resident who violates HOA safety regulations. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was character assassination. And worst of all, it was only part 4. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself I was reading it wrong, but the words didn't change. The photos didn't disappear. Karen had truly posted my face online like I was some kind of criminal. Dangerous resident. Threat to the community. Violent behavior caught on camera. The mate. A guy who had begged for an ambulance while his wife struggled to breathe. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped my phone. My wife was still asleep, and suddenly I was glad she wasn't seeing this, because this wasn't just embarrassing. It was humiliating on a level I didn't even know existed. I took a slow breath, then another. But the shaking didn't stop. I walked outside to get some air, but instead of calming down, my chest tightened as soon as I saw those dumpsters again. 6 metal monsters lined up across my only road like a blockade in a war zone. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to fear. Not fear of Karen. Fear of what would happen if my wife had another emergency. Fear of being trapped. Fear of being powerless. I leaned over the railing of the porch and rubbed my eyes. This can't keep happening, I whispered. I can't let her keep doing this. Just then my phone buzzed again, this time a call. It was my neighbor, Jim. A good guy. Middle-aged, soft-spoken, the type of man who mows his lawn twice a week just because he genuinely enjoys it. Hey, he said, voice shaky. Man, are you okay? No, I said bluntly, not even close. He sighed. Karen made it look really bad. People think you attacked her or something. Attacked her, I nearly laughed. She blocked my road with trash. I know, he whispered. I know the truth, but the HOA board, they're eating it up. She posted a whole statement. She's saying she's filing complaints. And she said she's starting removal procedures. I blinked. Removal from what? The community, he said. She's trying to get you expelled. I felt my heart stop, not beat slower, stop. Expelled from my own land. She's twisting some old city ordinance, he said. Claiming your bridge creates a safety conflict with HOA utilities. She's getting signatures. People think you're some angry man who tears down HOA property. I closed my eyes, letting the frustration swirl inside my chest like a tide rising too fast. Jim, I said slowly, I didn't tear anything down, I was clearing my own bridge. I know, he repeated, but she's loud, and when people are scared, they believe loud. I ended the call, not because I was angry at Jim, he was trying to help, but because the more he talked, the heavier the world felt on my shoulders. I sat down on the porch steps, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. This was spiraling. And the dumpsters were still sitting there, like a reminder that Karen wasn't done. I told myself I needed a plan, something to fight back, something legal, something smart. But before I could think, I heard a rustle in the bushes, then footsteps on gravel. I stood up fast. A woman appeared, thin, glasses, hair pulled back. It took me a second to remember her name, Emily, one of the quieter neighbors who kept to herself. She walked toward me hesitantly, holding something in her hands. Can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded. She handed me a manila folder. I think you should see this, she said. I opened it, and my stomach twisted again. Inside were printouts of messages from the HOA group chat, not the public one, the private one, the one I wasn't part of. And every page was worse than the last. Lines of Karen stirring people up. Telling them I was unstable. Telling them I screamed profanity at her. Saying I threatened HOA staff. Claiming I vandalized community property. None of it true. Not one word. I looked up at Emily. Why are you showing me this? She swallowed nervously. Because she did this to us too, 3 years ago. She ruined my husband's business permit, said he violated landscaping rules. It cost us thousands. My eyebrows rose. So why didn't anyone stop her? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because she scares people, and she gets away with everything because nobody pushes back. You're the first person I've seen stand up to her. I sat back stunned. I'm not trying to pick a fight. I know, she said, but she picked one with you. Silence fell. Then a new noise cut through it. Clank, metal, movement. I turned toward the dumpsters. Someone was moving around them. I stepped closer, Emily right behind me. Then we saw it. A man in a reflective vest. HOA logo on his back. Carrying a padlock and a thick metal chain. He wasn't just blocking the road. He was locking it. I walked up fast. Hey, what do you think you're doing? He barely looked at me. Orders from the HOA president. Temporary closure. You can't lock my only exit. Take it up with HOA, he said. I'm just enforcing. He looped the thick chain through two dumpsters and yanked hard. Click. The heavy lock snapped shut. It hit me then. If I needed to drive out. If I needed help. If my wife needed an ambulance. We wouldn't be able to leave. At all. And Karen knew it. She'd turned my property into a cage. And Part 5 had just made one thing clear. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was entrapment. I stood there staring at that chain like it was a snake coiled around my lifeline. A thick, cold metal barrier between me and the outside world, between my wife and medical help, between safety and disaster. You can't do this, I said again, louder this time, trying to keep my voice steady. This is illegal. The HOA worker didn't even blink. Talk to Karen, he said, dusting his hands and walking back to his truck like he'd just finished installing a garden fence, instead of trapping a family on their own property. As the engine faded, Emily whispered behind me, "She's gone too far this time." Too far. Karen passed too far 3 chapters ago. But this was something different. Something planned. Something cruel. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my thoughts organized, but they scattered like dropped marbles. I kept imagining sirens again, the look on the paramedic's face when he couldn't cross the bridge, my wife gasping for air. My hands clenched without me realizing. I felt something crack inside me. Something that had been patient for too long. I need to film this, I muttered. I pulled out my phone and started recording every angle of the chain, the dumpsters, the blocked bridge, the locked road. I narrated every detail like I was building a case, which, let's be honest, I was. Emily watched me quietly, arms wrapped around herself. When I finished, she said, "You're going to fight this, right?" I nodded, "I'll call the sheriff." She shook her head slowly. "He's part of the HOA Facebook group. Karen's been talking to him too." Of course she had. Of course she had. Karen didn't fight fair. She fought like a politician, dirty, loud, and with just enough fake rules to confuse everyone else. Still, calling the sheriff was the only immediate option. I went inside, grabbed the home phone, sat at the kitchen table and dialed. County Sheriff's Office. "Hi, my property has been blocked off by my HOA. They chain-locked my only exit. My wife has medical issues. This is a safety hazard." The dispatcher's tone turned cautious. "Are you the resident on Birchwood Bridge Road?" My throat tightened. Yes. There was a pause. Then she said the sentence I feared most. "We've received complaints about you today." Complaints. Complaints. "Ma'am," I said, gripping the phone, "I'm the one being harassed." She exhaled like she'd been holding back her words. The sheriff will come out to take a statement. When's? When available. I looked at the window, at the chain, at the dumpsters. At the ridiculous, terrifying prison Karen had built. Please, I said softly, this is urgent. She repeated, when available, and hung up. For a moment I sat there frozen. The whole house felt smaller, walls closing in, air thinning. I walked back to the bedroom where my wife was resting. Her breathing was calm now, but seeing her so fragile made my chest ache. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. Hey, you look pale, everything okay? I didn't want to worry her, not in her condition, not when stress could trigger another episode. So I lied. Yeah, I whispered, brushing her hair back. Everything's fine. But inside, nothing was fine. I stepped outside again, needing space to think. Emily was still near the dumpsters, staring at them like they were wild animals. That chain, she said, isn't coming off unless someone cuts it. I don't have bolt cutters, I muttered. I might. A voice came from the side yard. It was Jim, holding a pair of massive industrial cutters that looked older than both of us combined. You can't cut that, Emily whispered. Karen will explode. I looked at the chain. Then at my house. Then back at Jim. She already exploded, I said. We're just living in the fallout. Jim stepped closer. You want it off. Every logical part of me screamed wait for the sheriff. Call a lawyer, don't escalate. But logic wasn't living in my house. Logic wasn't sleeping next to my weak wife. Logic wasn't staring at a chain, blocking the only road an ambulance could use. Fear was. Love was. Responsibility was. And they all screamed the same answer. Yes, I said. Jim nodded once. He positioned the cutters around the thick metal chain. Emily held her breath. I braced myself. A snap. The chain jolted, then fell loose onto the gravel with a heavy metallic thud. And before the dust even settled, a car engine revved in the distance. We all turned. It was Karen's SUV, racing down the road like she'd been watching us from a window the whole time. She slammed on the brakes so hard her tires screeched. She jumped out, face red, eyes wild. What do you think you're doing? She screamed, pointing at the broken chain like it was a dead body. I stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. I'm opening my road, for my wife, for emergencies. She jabbed a finger in my face. You just committed vandalism on HOA property. That is my property, I said. My bridge, my road, my land. She laughed, a loud, sharp, unhinged sound. Not anymore, she said. You're about to find out what authority really looks like. And the way she said it. The confidence. The cold certainty. It chilled me deeper than the dumpsters ever could. Because it told me one thing. Karen wasn't done. In fact, Part 6 was only the beginning of her real plan. Karen didn't just walk toward me, she marched, like a general ready to launch an airstrike. Her heels crunched on the gravel, her red blazer almost glowing under the afternoon sun. I swear even the wind went quiet. You think cutting that chain makes you brave, she hissed. No, it makes you reckless. Jim shifted beside me, but I lifted my hand slightly, my way of telling him not to step in. This was between me and her. What authority are you talking about, Karen? I said. The kind you invent on Facebook, because last I checked, you don't own the county. She smirked like she'd been waiting for that line. Oh, but someone I know does control your county access, she said, tapping her phone dramatically. And he's on his way right now. Before I could process that, she added. You're finished. Then she spun around and walked back to her SUV, leaving me in the middle of the road with a cold truth sinking deeper and deeper in my chest. Karen wasn't bluffing. She had something. Someone. And whatever she'd arranged. It was already in motion. 20 minutes later, the sound of a siren echoed through the trees. Not an ambulance siren. A sheriff's siren. A white county cruiser rolled up, dust swirling behind it. Sheriff Donnelly got out, big guy, gray mustache, wide stance like he practiced intimidation posture in the mirror. Karen practically floated toward him. "Sheriff, thank God you came," she said, dramatic hand-on-heart performance and all. "We have a violent resident destroying HOA property and threatening members." I almost laughed. Violent. The mate. The sheriff turned his cold eyes toward me. "You cut this chain." "I opened my road," I said. "For emergencies, my wife is sick. This was the only exit." Donnelly didn't nod, didn't react, didn't blink. "HOA says this road falls under shared pathway jurisdiction," he said. I stared at him. No, it doesn't. This is my deeded property, my land, my bridge. I've shown the county documents before." But he waved that off like the truth was a fly buzzing around his face. "HOA president tells me you've been acting unstable, threatening people, removing safety barriers." Safety barriers. That's what the trash had become. Barriers. "Sheriff," I said carefully, "Karen is lying. She blocked this bridge with dumpsters, my wife." But he cut me off. "Step away from me, sir." The tone. The stiffness. The absolute refusal to listen. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. He wasn't here to help. He wasn't here to mediate. He was here to enforce her narrative. Karen crossed her arms smugly. "Sheriff, he needs a warning at least, possibly removal." "Removal from what?" I snapped. "I own this land." Donnelly raised a hand. "Sir, you need to calm down." Those words, calm down, hit harder than anything else. Because they're always used when someone wants to pretend you're dangerous even when you're not. My voice dropped. My wife could have died because of this blockade. Karen rolled her eyes. "Always drama with you." That did it. Not rage. Not yelling. Just something inside me cracking so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "You think this is a game," I said, voice trembling. "You think blocking a medical route is some petty power move." She stepped closer. "It's not petty, it's regulation." I felt my jaw tighten. "You're going to get someone killed." She leaned in, her voice low and poisonous. "And you're going to learn that I'm the wrong woman to challenge." The sheriff ordered me to stand back while he documented the area, which meant he took pictures of the broken chain but none of the dumpsters, none of the blockage, none of the note she taped earlier, only the evidence that made me look guilty. Emily whispered behind me. She got to him, she really did. I didn't respond. I was too busy watching the sheriff and Karen talk privately, their heads close, her finger pointing at my house, her voice low and confident. That's when something strange happened. I saw Karen hand him a folder. A long, thick folder. He opened it, read something inside, then nodded. And the second he nodded, a cold chill ran from my throat all the way down to my heels. Because that nod wasn't just agreement. It was approval. Permission. Action. Something was about to happen. The sheriff walked toward me again, his expression unreadable. "Sir," he said slowly, "I need you to come with me." My breath stopped. "What's why?" You're being temporarily detained for disorderly conduct and obstruction of community safety operations. I felt like the world tilted sideways. What obstruction? I removed garbage, sheriff, trash on my own bridge. He didn't budge, sir, turn around. Karen stood behind him, smiling like she'd just won a chess match she never doubted. You can't be serious, I whispered. My wife is sick. But he grabbed my wrist. And right then, my wife's voice echoed from the porch. Stop. We all turned. She stood in the doorway, pale, shaking, but standing, holding the railing like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Don't take him, she said, voice cracking. He saved my life. Sheriff Donnelly hesitated. Just a moment. Just a flicker. But it was enough for Karen to hiss. She's lying. My wife's knees buckled. I ran toward her. The sheriff finally shouted, Hey, stay where? But I caught her before she collapsed. Her breathing wrong again. Vast. Shallow. Strained. Emily yelled, She needs help. Jim shouted, Call 911. But then, we all froze. Because Karen stepped in front of the bridge again. Smiling. Blocking the exit with her own body. If she's sick, she said coldly. Then maybe you should have followed the rules. Karen stood there, blocking the bridge like a statue made of fury, heels digging into the gravel. My wife was gasping, pale, barely conscious in my arms. Jim and Emily hovered nearby, frozen in disbelief at the audacity. Even the sheriff, usually a wall of stone, looked unsure for the first time. I could feel my chest tighten, the panic clawing up from my stomach, but one thought pushed everything else aside. Emily needed me. I planted my feet and said, Step aside, Karen, she's sick. She needs an ambulance right now. Her smile didn't waver. Rules come first, you can't just. I didn't finish listening. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. Full-screen video, front-facing camera on me, bridge and her. My hands shook, but I narrated every word, every action, every absurd moment. I said loudly, This is Karen, the HOA president, blocking emergency access, putting my wife's life at risk. This is illegal and dangerous. She saw it, her eyes flickered, but she didn't move. I shouted to the neighbors across the street, Call 911, she's blocking emergency access. Within seconds, my phone rang. The dispatcher's voice was urgent. Sir, we have multiple reports of blocked access. Ambulance is en route. Stay on the line and keep your wife safe. A rush of hope surged through me. Karen's expression faltered slightly when she realized more eyes were on her. Her perfectionist armor cracked. People had begun walking out of their houses, filming, calling, whispering to each other. The sound of a real ambulance, siren cut through the tension, growing louder by the second. Karen's jaw tightened. She glanced at the sheriff. Donnelly's face finally shifted, recognition, maybe guilt. He muttered something to her. She turned, realizing she had no backup this time. I stepped toward the bridge slowly, keeping Emily safe in my arms. Jim followed, cutting a clear path. Karen lifted her hands but didn't block me anymore. The chain of her arrogance had snapped. When the ambulance arrived, the EMTs jumped out, quickly assessing Emily's condition. The siren drowned everything else. The shouting, Karen's muttered complaints, even my own pounding heartbeat. Within moments, they lifted her onto the stretcher. I walked alongside, holding her hand as she whispered, Thank you, I love you. I didn't answer, my throat was too tight, but I squeezed her hand, letting her know I was there. As the ambulance pulled onto the cleared bridge, neighbors began gathering, murmuring about what they had seen. Karen retreated to her SUV, realizing the spectacle had turned against her. For the first time, she looked small. Later that night, after Emily was stabilized at the hospital, I sat on the porch with Jim and Emily beside me. Karen's social media posts had exploded, but now the tide had shifted. The videos we recorded of her blocking the bridge, the chain, her threats, went viral in the neighborhood group. People were finally seeing the truth. HOA rules, they had no weight against lives. By morning, an emergency board meeting had been called. Karen tried her usual theatrics, but she faced an army of neighbors armed with video evidence, testimonies, and outrage. Within hours, she was removed from her position. The sheriff publicly apologized for delays and clarified that no resident could have emergency access blocked. I still remember walking home from the hospital the next day, Emily leaning on my shoulder, weak but smiling. My bridge stood untouched. No trash, no dumpsters, no locks, just a clear path across, sunlight glinting off the wooden planks. I knelt beside it, touching the weathered railing. I whispered, "This bridge saved her. I'll never take it for granted." Emily leaned against me, still pale but alive. "You didn't just save me," she said softly. "You saved us all." The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. People apologized for doubting me. Neighbors we hadn't spoken to before came by to check on Emily. And most importantly, the HOA finally realized there were limits to power. As for Karen, she moved away within a month. The local news covered her downfall. The footage of her blocking an emergency exit became a cautionary tale. Some days I wonder if she ever fully understood how far she went, or if she ever realized that rules cannot trump human life. And me, I sit on that porch sometimes, coffee in hand, Emily laughing beside me, and I remember the fear, the chain, the dumpsters, the siren, the absurdity, the rage. I remember how fragile life is. And I remember one crucial truth. Sometimes standing up, even when it's terrifying, even when the odds are against you, can save more than just a life. It can save your dignity, your family, your community. That day my wife lived. My bridge survived. And HOA Karen learned the hard way that some lines, human life, love, safety, cannot be crossed. And that's the story. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.